Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the MetaStellar YouTube channel. My name is Maria KOROLOV. I'm the editor here at MetaStellar. And are you looking for some free science fiction and fantasy books to get you through this weekend? We've got them. Today, we've got a killer robot, an alien arrival, and a cat that turns into a vampire. And the number one book is A Story of Survival After an EMP Attack. But before we get to that, I want to thank reviews editor Krista Nolan, video editor Alex KOROLOV, and community member E.S. Foster for helping me out with the reviews. And E.S. Foster is here with us today. Hi, Emma.
Hi.
That's her. Get the books while they're still free. Today is March 8th, and there's no telling how long the books will stay free. Publishers and authors usually make them free for between 1 and 5 days in order to gain interest in the rest of the series that the book is in. So you might have only 1 day, you might have 5 days, nobody knows. But if you're late, you might still find your favorite author and just have to pay a couple of bucks for the book, or the book might be in Kindle Unlimited, and then if you're a subscriber, you read it for free, because Kindle Unlimited is where you pay 12 bucks a month and read all the books you want. If you don't want to miss any of these lists, subscribe to the newsletter. The link is in the description box below, or subscribe to our channel. Okay, let's get to the books. Let's pull up book number 5. Here we go. Here we go. It's called Betrayal. It's by Pippa DaCosta, and it's the first of 6 books in the Thousand Revolution space opera series. The other books are $3 to $4 each, and they're not in Kindle Unlimited. This is the author's second time on our Free Friday list. So I love space opera, and I love the book's tagline. She's programmed to kill. He'll do anything to survive. Sounds awesome, right? So the book opens with number 1001, who I'm guessing from the context is some kind of an android, and she's being interrogated by a doctor. And the doctor wants to know why 1001 killed a guy. But it was the doctor who ordered the murder after bypassing 1001's fail-safes. But 1001 can't say this out loud because of protocols. And the doctor smiles. And she starts writing out an order to have 1001 decommissioned. So 1001 kills the doctor because she doesn't have any fail-safes anymore. The doc turned them off. But before she can escape the building, alarms go off, her body crumbles, she's paralyzed, she's quickly captured. Then in the next chapter, we meet Caleb. He's a giant jerk who's pissed at his second-in-command, Fran, for being hot, for being too friendly with local authorities, with the fact that she doesn't want to sleep with him. Also, he smuggles illegal cargo, and they're about to be boarded when they finally get clearance and take off. Very exciting, tense scene there. And it's only after they're on the move again when Fran tells him she let a passenger on board. Then we switch back to 1001's point of view. She's on a ship, huddled in a hold, a stowaway, and it's getting cold. She can last a few hours before she risks total system failure. Then the captain comes in, and it's Caleb. She knows who he is. She looked him up before she broke into his ship. He was discharged from Fleet Command for misconduct and is wanted in 3-star systems for piracy and smuggling. So I can see why she picked her ship his ship to stow away on, but I don't know how she escaped from the corporation that was, using her as a murderer, or the doctor who was using her as a murderer. So anyway, she begs Caleb to let her stay. She promises not to kill him and offers to pay him. Where she gets money, I don't know. In the next chapter, we switch back to Caleb's point of view, and he's thinking that if he turns her in, the bounty will pay for a complete overhaul of his ship because the corporation that made her is definitely going to want her back. And then things get worse for all of them. I'm not going to give away more plot twists, but there are a lot of them. I had to force myself to put the book down to get back to work. The action moves fast, is pretty dirty and gritty, and there is some dirty stuff in there. Caleb just keeps doubling down on being an absolutely horrible human being. Fran turns out to be not too much better. And let's not get started on that mysterious other passenger that she brought on board. 1001 does come off as likable. Normally, I wouldn't stick with a book with so many bad people in it. but I love the premise, I love the setting, I love the fast pace, and I'm very interested in finding out if 1001 is going to be able to get free of the evil corporation that created her. I'm going to stick with the book. So that's what I wrote earlier today when I did my review. Then when I was done with today's work, I went back to the book and I'm almost at the end of it. And I have to say that it does get dirtier. Caleb and Fran do redeem themselves, and the twists and turns just keep on twisting and turning. So if that's the kind of thing you're looking for, I highly recommend it. Perfect escapist read for the weekend. But just keep in mind, Caleb starts out as a total jerk, and he stays a jerk through the whole book, but reasons. But anyway, let's go on to the next book, Inception by K.J. Gillenwater, and it's the first of 3 books in the Genesis Machine sci-fi thriller series. So it's one of those weird things where the series title is bigger than the book title, but who knows. So Melody Friedenthal read this for us, and she says that she had some quibbles with the copy editing. For example, Petty Officer Ryan, who the book opens with, turns off his flashlight, and then a couple sentences later, his flashlight flickers out. You know, little details like that. She's picky because she's a copy editor. So anyway, she says that the action starts out right away. There's a huge ball of fire streaking over where Ryan and his watch partner are stationed. They're standing guard in the rain. This ball of fire crashes. Ryan calls to HQ for emergency help. Then he and the other guard go and investigate. And it's not a plane, which was his first assumption. In fact, it's slimy. He calls HQ again, but instead of describing what he's seeing, he just asks for someone to be sent down. And Melody thinks that Ryan has forgotten his military training because, you know, you describe what you're seeing, right? Anyway, the second chapter switches to California and something called the Defense Language Institute. And Melody loves linguistics, so she's like much more interested in it right now. And she says that we meet Charlie Cutter, who's also a petty officer, multilingual, and has been pulled out of her daily swim lap swim to be taken to this organization's Defense Language Institute's headquarters for new orders. She's being reassigned even before she graduates to the Naval Criminal Investigative Services Unit, NCIS. She's not happy, and she thinks her father, who works at the NSA, has pulled strings, but he didn't. She's directed to a super secure facility where she meets her new team, and they're not pleased to see her, but she's determined to prove herself. Then Charlie finds out that this team investigates extracurricular activity, and she thinks they're pulling her leg. So there's a mysterious crash of a UFO, likely aliens, a brilliant linguist with a chip on her shoulder, and a top secret mission. And Melody says that she's game, it's intriguing, and she'll be sticking with the book this weekend. Okay, next we have Apollo's Raven by Linnea Tanner, the first of 4 books in Curse of Clansmen and Kings, a romantic fantasy series. The other books are $5 each, and they're not in Kindle Unlimited. And it's not the first time on our list. And Emma read this for us. Emma, what did you think of this book?
So I thought it was like a really interesting premise. And in order to explain and review this book, there's a little bit of historical context going in, but I felt pretty good because it's something that I talked a little bit about in my bachelor's thesis. So it's like, you know, shameless plug. But basically, it's set in Britannia, that is like the area where Britain and Ireland, everything is. And it's during the Roman occupation, so it takes place in AD 24. So back then, Rome, the Roman Empire, was still a thing. It had taken over pretty much everything. So this is primarily set in like the Celtic area, and there's a lot of mythological elements, but it definitely comes across as alternative fantasy. So I really enjoyed that context because that's like the sort of time period I really enjoy researching. So the story starts with a princess named Katrin. She's the daughter of King Amran, and her goal at the start of the book So she really wants to become a druidess. Like there are in this world, there are druidesses, there are all kinds of wizards. They can practice magic, they can do all these cool things. That's what Katrin wants to do, but for some reason, her father won't let her do that. So she's trained in weapons instead. Because, you never know with the Roman occupation if there's going to be a random battle. But on the plus side, she does possess magic. There is a gigantic black raven that follows her wherever she goes, and it sort of acts like her physical guide, so it like lets her know if people are approaching when it flies around, and also like her spiritual guide because she can almost have conversations with it, which I thought was really cool. So she also possesses the ability of seeing what the raven sees when it flies in the air. So it's like she can close her eyes and immediately she's looking through the raven's eyes instead of her own. So I thought that was really cool. So one day she's out on the coast with her raven guide and her sister, and all of a sudden she sees a fleet, like a war fleet, coming up from along the horizon, and it's barreling towards her kingdom. But then all of a sudden, as she's looking, she thinks she sees her half brother on the lead ship, and then she sort of gets sucked into this portal. And it's not immediately clear what that portal is, because it's almost like she goes through it and then immediately ends right back up where she was beforehand. So it's not like she disappeared into a strange new world. She just ended up right where she was. So it's not immediately clear what happened there, but it's clear that there's certainly magic at work, and it's going to involve Katrin later. So she tells her sister about this fleet, but when Moore looks out where she just was, she doesn't see any ships at all. And then later on, as they're heading back, they do in fact see a bunch of ships approaching. But it's not Maroc, who I should mention is Katrin's half-brother, who was banished several years before. It's actually the Romans, the occupying Romans, and it's pretty clear that they're not there on friendly terms. In fact, they show up to the king, everyone's there, and they say, "We only recognize the men who are royal here. We think that Maroc is the one who is actually going to be in charge when you die." Which is a huge problem because he was banished. So eventually, it turns out that Katrin is part of an ancient curse that was cast by a druidess, hence why the king doesn't want Katrin to become a druidess, because obviously bad things will happen if she practices magic. So it turns out that she is part of this curse, and so is her half-brother Merrick. So she has to do everything in her power to make sure that she protects her family without fulfilling this curse, but then she also has to stop her half-brother, who is all too ready to do so. So there's lots of twists and turns. There's a whole lot of action in the beginning of these scenes, and it's especially interesting how they handle the magic, because it's not necessarily like confusing, but it's also leaving you asking, okay, how does this work? I really want to know more. So I really enjoyed that aspect. I especially enjoyed the historical parts of it because I haven't read a whole lot of alternate fantasy, but this feels like something that it would be definitely easy to get into that genre. I also really enjoyed Katrin because she comes across as headstrong but also considerate. She clearly loves her family, but she's also a bit of the black sheep. She wants to protect them, and I really like the idea of her wanting to learn magic to help others, even if it means she runs the risk of fulfilling that curse. So I really enjoy it. It wasn't too heavy on the romance, especially like in the beginning. I don't know what it will be like later on, but if you especially like historical fantasy with emphasis on the historical, I would highly recommend it.
All right, thanks. Okay, next is book number 2 on today's list. Book number 2 on today's. Oh, book number 2. Okay, there we go. Falling in Love with My Vampire Cat by Camilla Evergreen. The first of 3 books in the That's Paranormal, a paranormal romance series. Book 2 is $5 and is in Kindle Unlimited. Book 3 is available for pre-order, also for $5. So I love cozy magical mysteries, and I do have a sweet spot for rom-coms, and that's what this book kind of looked like. So I was optimistic, and I loved it from the beginning. So there was a trigger warnings page where the author says, "This book is if cottagecore and fantasy core had a tiny silly baby. Do not read this book if you're expecting angst, action, or sparkly skin." She also warns that the book includes mentions of sex, and notable tropes include the chosen one because the protagonist is chosen by a cat. So I love that. That sounds cozy and cute and fun. When the book opens, our protagonist, Willow, is sitting on a window seat, holding an epic fantasy novel and hating on real life humans, even children. She really hates children. Fortunately, she lives in a cottage that she inherited from her grandmother, surrounded by woods and chickens and garden beds. No children, and also no cows. And she's craving butter and cheese. She's going to have to go to a store and buy some stuff. She lives within walking distance of town, which is filled with people and children home on vacation for the summer, the horror. But, she dresses up and she heads out there. And when she gets to town, she finds 3 young rapscallions torturing a cat and chases them off. The cat scratches her, but then decides she's okay after all and climbs into her shopping basket and stays in there until she gets to the grocery store when it jumps out, but follows her into the store, follows her around while she's shopping, and then follows her home. And as she opens the door, the cat stops at the doorsill and she invites it in. And I'm immediately thinking, uh-oh, she invited a cat in. That sounds ominous. Then we jump ahead 5 years. She's been happily living with this cat, apparently. So we jump ahead and Willow wakes up in pain, bleeding, with a fanged vampire leaning over her, promising to save her life and get revenge on whoever did this to her. Is that a dream, a nightmare? And the guy kind of vaguely looks like her cat with the same colored eyes and stuff. Was her cat actually a vampire in disguise all this time? But then she wakes up and everything's normal. No signs of blood. She's back in her bed. But she's wearing a different nightgown. And usually she wakes up because the cat is standing on her chest, and there's no cat standing on her chest this time. And she smells food. Something's cooking in the kitchen. So she does the rational thing and tries to get out the window. She has plans to flee to Florida and find a therapist who can diagnose her with reading too much shifter romance. I love that. Then the guy who's in the kitchen comes in, a very sexy vampire, who's wearing her frilly white apron, and he tells her that she should eat before going anywhere because she's still recovering, because she was attacked the night before, and to save her life and keep her safe in the future, he's made her into his thrall. And the reason that a monster attacked her the night before was because she has a higher than normal amount of Fae ancestry. And also, he's her cat, and he's been living in her house and watching her shower for the past 5 years. Also, he's over 1,700 years old. So a lot of backstory just like thrown at you all at once. Oh, and I forgot to make the book bigger for you guys so you can see it. Here you go. There it is, full-sized. So she's like, this isn't happening to me. I've been reading too much of this stuff. This is crazy. She calls him an ancient pervert who tricks young women into doing his bidding, and she's not wrong. She tells him that she wants nothing to do with him, and she wants to mourn the loss of her cat in peace. And he leaves her in peace to mourn. The next day, she wakes up alone and wonders if there's some kind of government or witch lawyers she can turn to for help about freeloading pervert vampires. Good for her. That's the kind of thinking she should be doing. And then she finds the vampire still in her kitchen. Apparently, he took the thing she said, leave her alone to mourn, as like being a temporary thing, like leave her alone for now. And he just like came right back again. And he tells her that he's loved her from the instant she saved his life. And she gives in and lets him stay because she realizes that in return for letting him stay, she gets to live forever. So, I was really hoping that she would kick him out and find that witch council and file restraining orders against him and do like all the rational things. But she lets herself be seduced by his hotness and his mesmerizing charms and stuff. And maybe things are going to turn around. But, I went back to those trigger warnings and I missed a few that include forced proximity, enemies to lovers, and soulmates. 3 tropes that I really hate. So I'm not going to stick with this book. But if you're a fan of those tropes, which are super popular, and are looking for a very funny book with a sarcastic, funny, self-aware protagonist who knows that she's in something that sounds like a paranormal romance novel, then check it out. It is very fun to read. All right, and before we go on to book number 1 on today's list, I want to thank our Patreon sponsors. The link to the Patreon page is below. That's how we raise all our funds, and all the money raised goes to pay for original fiction. Speaking of original fiction, we're in the middle of our spring submission cycle. Emma, you're one of the judges. How's it looking so far?
Looks good. We have a lot of submissions, so it's going to be busy, but that means we get a chance to read all kinds of amazing stories. So I'm really excited about this cycle.
For those who don't know, all the accepted stories, we pay 8 cents a word for a story, and they all go into our anthologies. Year 1 is out, Year 2 is out. I'm currently editing Year 3 with the help of a bunch of people here at MetaStellar. Like I said, we're all volunteers. All the money that is raised goes to pay for original fiction. And if you don't want to be a Patreon supporter, you can also buy some merch. And here's some more merch. You can buy one of our anthologies. So we would really appreciate it. But you can also just support us by hitting like and subscribe on this channel. That would be awesome as well. Now let's go on to book number 1 on today's list. Let me make that a little bigger for you guys. Here you go. A Winter Homestead by Colton Lively. It's a standalone thriller about kind of a post-apocalyptic survival after an EMP blast. So the author has been on our list before a lot, like a ton of books have been on our list, all of which are also EMP survival thrillers. This is a very popular genre, and people really, really love it. And including one of our reviewers, Alex KOROLOV, he reads all these books. So an EMP is an electromagnetic pulse that takes out electronics, but leaves like people and buildings untouched. So it's totally harmless to living things. You don't even feel it, except that your phone goes dead. So apparently it's a wish fulfillment kind of fantasy for a lot of people. So yeah, so if you like those kind of books, stay tuned. So Alex says that in the first chapter, we meet Chelsea, a 20-year-old wife and mother who lives in a small city just north of Chicago. Her husband, Henry, manages a hardware store near their house. And we learn a bunch of her backstory. Her house is on a half-acre of land. She takes care of chickens. She has a dog who's about to give birth to puppies. And she also has a 10-year-old son named James. Then in the next chapter, the puppies are born and a news broadcast comes on. And we hear that America has been fighting battles with Russia and that Russia has placed some suspicious satellites in orbit. So with that ominous news, we got that. Then Chelsea's husband comes home from work. And then in the next chapter, we learn they're very much in love. They discuss how the war with Russia is going. Henry suggests they go away to a hunting cabin they own and make sure it's fully stocked with emergency supplies. And nothing really dramatic or EMP related happens for several more chapters, Alex says. So there's quite a bit of this kind of tension building and relationship stuff going on. So it's a very slow build kind of book. A lot of EMP stories get right to the action and the murder and the society collapsing into chaos right from the beginning. But this one doesn't. It has a very slow kind of cozy build. Alex says that he prefers a lot of excitement in his post-apocalyptic fiction, so he won't be reading this one. But a lot of people do like it. It's number 1 on today's list, and the author has been on our list a lot. So if you like this kind of stuff, check it out. And I hope you guys come back next Friday because we do this every single week. We read the first few chapters of the books on Amazon's top science fiction and fantasy free list. All right. I want to thank Emma for being here with us today. Let us know in the comments if you've read any of these books or if you plan to. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more bookish content. Plus, we have a newsletter that goes out every single Friday afternoon in case you want to get a list of these books and our thoughts about them in text format. All right. Well, thank you very much for being here with us. You guys are awesome. You're a great audience. Yeah, I can hear you clapping over the airwaves. And if you're a writer, submit your story. The submission window closes on March 31st. All right, Emma is waiting for them. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.